Welcome to our live stream today. We're going to talk about the future of Chocolatey CLI. And today, as usual, I've got Gary Park with me. Gary, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, I can do that. My name is Gary Park. I am a senior software engineer here at Chocolatey, and I've been doing this for a while now, but I'm having fun while we're doing it, so that's the main thing.
Thanks, Gary. So Gary is our senior developer here at Chocolatey Software. My name is Paul Broadith, and I'm the technical engineering manager. So I manage the engineering team, which comprises operations and the development team. So today, what we're going to look at is we're going to do something a little different. So with these streams, normally we talk about a particular Chocolatey product, and we talk about maybe a release of the product or something that we're going to be releasing very shortly. And then in our other live stream, we do two live streams a month. One we do on the products I mentioned. That's on the first Thursday of the month. And our community live stream we do on the third Thursday of the month. So for this one, we're going to look at the future of Chocolatey CLI and some of the plans we've got coming up in the mid to long term period of Chocolatey CLI. Some of them might come in a little sooner, and some of them might get pushed back a little bit. What we don't like to do here at Chocolatey is come up with a very defined timeline of when we're going to be releasing particular features for the product. And the reason for that is simply that our products are driven by our customers and our community. So, for example, we could be working on a particular feature, but the community and customers think that something else is more important. So we would move that around in order to make sure that our customers and community are happy. So that's the reason we don't do timelines. We do have roadmaps, and we tend to keep them internal for very similar reasons as I just discussed there. But today we're going to look at things we want to do with Chocolatey things. Let's look at things we want to do with Chocolatey CLI going forward in the future. And we've got an agenda today that myself and Gary are going to run through, and we're going to talk about some of those features that we're going to implement, as I said, in the mid to long term. And before we jump into that, what I wanted to say is that we stream on Twitch and YouTube, as I said, on the first Thursday and the third Thursday of every month. So this month it's 4th of August for this one, and the 18th of August for a community live stream. And then what we do is we put those videos onto YouTube. If you want to be notified when we're streaming, please like and follow us on Twitch and YouTube. Also, if you subscribe to the channel as well on YouTube, you'll get notifications when those new videos go up. And it really, really helps us get the message out about Chocolatey. So it's very, very much appreciated. And please like those videos as well. That always helps. So we're just going to go through the agenda, and I've got the agenda over here, so that's why I'm going to keep looking over here. One of the things that we're going to do, and this is maybe a shorter term goal for us rather than mid to long, but we'll see how that pans out. But Gary, .NET 4.8, just throw that one at you. Talk to us about .NET 4.8 and where we're going to go with that.
Sure. So .NET 4.8 is what we are envisioning is going to be the next target framework for all of the Chocolatey components. Now, when I say Chocolatey components, I mean Chocolatey CLI, Chocolatey license, Chocolatey agent, Chocolatey GUI license extension, etc. So for the longest time, Chocolatey has used .NET Framework 4.0 as its base .NET framework. We're now getting to the point where enough of the base supported operating systems that we support as part of Chocolatey either come with .NET Framework 4.8 already installed, or it's a simple installation to get 4.8. So the idea is that we will transition over to use .NET Framework 4.8 for the lowest supported version of Chocolatey and all of its components. Now, if you are running Chocolatey on something like Windows 10 or Windows 11, then you're already running Chocolatey on .NET Framework 4.8. But the difference here is that while a .NET Framework 4.0 application will run on .NET Framework 4.8, but a .NET Framework 4.8 application will not run on an earlier version of .NET Framework. So the reason I'm saying that is that technically this will be a breaking change, and it's a breaking change in terms of what we support. So this change, although we will be looking to bring it in reasonably soon, will go out under the banner of a 2.0 release of Chocolatey, and then major version bumps of all the other components. Now, one caveat to that is that Chocolatey GUI and Chocolatey GUI license extension all are already on .NET Framework 4.8. The reason that that's possible and the reason that was needed is, well, the latter one first. We bumped to a newer version of the core components engine that we run, which is called MATApps. And in order to get support for high DPI support across multiple monitors, we had to update to .NET Framework 4.8 already. So that's already done. But Chocolatey and all the other components are still running .NET Framework 4.0, and we're going to transition to 4.8. So we're envisioning that it's hopefully not going to be a showstopper for anyone. But in that scenario, the recommendation would be to pin to the 1.x version of Chocolatey, which is still running on 4.0, and not go to 2.0 at this time, if that's not possible. So,
yeah, I think there we go. As you said, Gary, the vast majority of our customers that we know about, because bear in mind, Chocolatey doesn't have any telemetry that phones home, which means that the environments our customers are running on, they tell us about through, tickets that might come in or conversations that we have. But it's fair to say the vast majority of our customers running an operating system where they can use .NET 4.8 or an environment where they can update from 4 or 4.5 to 4.8. But we do also know that there is a very small number of customers that wasn't an option, certainly recently. And as Gary says, then just pin to that older version of Chocolatey, that 1 version of Chocolatey, your 1.x versions there, and you'll still get that functionality that exists there today. So the breaking change that's going to come through is going to affect a very, very small number of customers, and we will help customers be able to transition from a .NET 4, .NET 4.8 and get the 4.8, sorry, .NET 4 and 4.5 to 4.8 update and make sure that that's all running fine. So hopefully that's clear. This is a version 2 change, so it's not coming, tomorrow. This is a version 2 change, and customers will have time to be able to make sure that they can upgrade to that if they need to. The next one we want to talk about, and this is a big one, that this has been requested for quite some time in various different ways. It's pre and post installation hooks, or upgrade or uninstall hooks, that we're looking at. And there's a pull request that's been put in for this by the Cake, as we know of him. He does an awful lot of work for Chocolatey open source, and we really, really appreciate it. There's a pull request going in about this to implement pre and post hooks globally and for individual packages for install, upgrade, and uninstall for packages. So that would mean that you would have a pre-hook that would run a PowerShell script before the install, upgrade, or uninstall. And again, you've got that post one there as well that would run after that is done for all packages, and you could have it for individual packages as well. Gary, do you want to talk a little bit more about that, as you've been looking more into the pull request and the technical side of things, so you can give us a bit more of a technical overview of it?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting pull request that's been put in by the Cake. But just to give a kind of level set a little bit, Chocolatey already has the concept of what we refer to as extension packages. So an extension package is a PowerShell module with a collection of functions that are made available to the packaging scripts within a package. So within a Chocolatey install.ps1 file or a Chocolatey uninstall.ps1 file, you can make use of those functions that are exported within that extension. So a hook package is slightly different in the sense that it's a PowerShell script, as Paul said, but that PowerShell script will be executed before the main Chocolatey install.ps1, the Chocolatey uninstall.ps1, etc. So why is this needed? Why would we want to do something like this? It's quite often the case that there are some things that always needs to happen before you install a Chocolatey package, or something that always needs to happen after a Chocolatey package is installed. Now, arguably, you could put that into an extension package, and you could call that package or call that extension function within each package, but that's a lot of work, a lot of churn for what is something that could be done globally on all packages that are being installed on the machine. So that's where the concept of the hook package comes into play. And I'm saying a hook package there because the way it's currently being set up, it would install as a new custom package type within Chocolatey. So when you do Choco install Chocolatey extension package, Chocolatey handles that .extension name of the nut keg and does something specific. It extracts the files to an extensions folder within the Chocolatey folder and then handles the extensions in the way that it's meant to. A hook package, so a .hook package, will work in exactly the same way. We will handle the installation of that in a specific way to drop the hook files or the contained hook files within the hooks folder, and then they'll be utilized from there. So it's going to be a Chocolatey package like any other Chocolatey package in the sense that you can just do Choco install hook package. You'll be listed when you do Choco list local only, etc. But it brings to the table essentially doing global functions before, after a package has been installed, upgraded, or uninstalled. So it's got the potential for doing lots of pretty cool stuff, some of which have been asked about or spoken about for a long time within the Chocolatey repository. And we think that this hook functionality will provide a mechanism to do those in a really easily maintained way, rather than kind of shoehorning something into the system. So I'm excited about the hook scripts or the hook packages coming into play.
One of the examples we talked about is in the repository as an issue in itself is desktop shortcuts. It's been a big one for a while, and we have debated that internally and how best to do that, and how best it is for both maintainers, moderators as well, and the community. But one of the things that we talked about, for example, in one of those pre and post hooks could be that it takes a snapshot or a list of all the shortcuts that are on the desktop, for example, before it installs any package. And then if that has changed after a package is installed, it would delete that new shortcut, and the understanding that the package you've just installed is the one that's actually added that shortcut. So it would keep those shortcuts on your desktop tidy. So that means that functionality doesn't have to be built in specifically to Chocolatey, because Chocolatey manages packages, it doesn't manage the software. But it would also mean that we don't have to extend the helpers there. We could just do that as a pre-post hook and resolve that issue. And it also means that there's flexibility in that issue as well. It means that people can do it in a way that we haven't set down. It means that, individuals can modify those scripts if they want. They can put their own scripts in there in order for them to run globally, or as we said, for specific packages. So I think that's fantastic that we're using that functionality to fix an issue that people have raised. So it wasn't really, they're not tied together, but now, that becomes an option for people to be able to do that. So this is, as Stevie has said in the chat there, if you're not watching the chat on Twitch, Stevie's just said, this is a big deal, and it is a big deal. It's been asked for some time, but there's different things that we've talked about, like the desktop shortcuts one. There's different things that would actually be resolved from this, that functionality doesn't have to be baked into Chocolatey itself. So yeah, it's a big deal, and we're really pleased that work has been done by one of the community. Has put that pull request in for one of the community. Okay, it's the Cake, and he puts in so much work to the open source, but we're really proud that this is coming through the community as well. So thank you, the Cake, again. So yeah, good stuff coming forward. Just jumping on to the next one. This is potentially a huge topic, and it's not. There's nothing we're talking about today is any secret. The GitHub repository that we've got for Chocolatey. You can go there. You can look at the pull request. You can look at the issues. You can look at the code that's kind of Chocolatey open source. And Nougat v3 is one of those pull requests that's in there. Now, you understand a lot more of the technical details than I do, Gary. So I'm going to turn this one completely over to you and stop talking now.
So yeah, as Paul said, this is something that has been requested for support within Chocolatey for a long time now. So let's break it down for a little bit. So what are we actually talking about? Because NuGet v3 is a little bit of an overloaded term, but essentially what we're talking about there is we want Chocolatey, choco.exe, to be able to list packages from a NuGet v3 API endpoint. That's a lot of words for basically saying any NuGet repository. So here I'm talking about whether it's Nexus or Artifactory or GitHub packages or GitLab packages or Azure Artifacts. All of those repositories typically, sometimes they only support one of them, but typically those repositories will support both the v2 and the v3 specification for NuGet feed. But there are some that will only support a v3 feed. Now, what we're aiming to do soon, and by soon I mean not 10 years time. I'm not, again, we're not going to give timeframes away, but it's quicker than 10 years away, let's put it that way. We're going to be adding support for the NuGet v3 API, the protocol that is NuGet v3, into choco.exe. Now, it will continue to support v2 feed, so that existing functionality won't go away. But what you will be able to do is if you had, let's say you were using GitLab packages and you are using some sort of internal publishing mechanism for your internal packages, or you're using it as your internal repository of packages that you're wanting to maintain, then today you can't do that with choco.exe. But with this release of Chocolatey, you would be able to use that that repository, because choco.exe would be able to understand the v3 protocol and be able to list packages from and install packages from that repository. Now, from a technical point of view, lots of stuff has changed under the hood, or lots of stuff will need to change under the hood. As most people know, Chocolatey came from NuGet. So NuGet was a packaging system for assemblies on Windows before Chocolatey, and they defined this specification, this protocol. And choco.exe, Chocolatey, was born from that, and we borrowed a lot of their base class libraries, which were known as NuGet.core assembly, but that stopped at a specific version. I forget the exact version number now, but that NuGet.core assembly stopped, and then we were still on that one of that older versions. And NuGet, in implementing the new v3 specification, broke that single NuGet.core assembly into multiple individual assemblies. So there's a scope of work there to figure out what's changed, where's it moved to, how do we get all these things pieced together so that we can continue to work in the way that Chocolatey works today, but also utilizing those additional v3 protocol API so that we can do all of that work. So again, for us, this is a breaking change. It's a breaking change in the sense that it's not a breaking change in the sense that everything that works today will continue to work, but because of the underlying fundamental changes in terms of what Chocolatey is and how it does things, that has changed to the point that it will be a breaking change. So look for this coming in a major release of Chocolatey, and there will be corresponding changes, obviously, in the other Chocolatey components, because they all take a dependency on Chocolatey, and that will flow through the other components. Now, the thing to mention, though, is that in this scope of work, nothing's happening to the Chocolatey community repository. Chocolatey community repository will still be a v2 feed, but because of the kind of backward compatibility, or the ability to do both a v2 feed and a v3 feed within the next version of Chocolatey, the fact that Chocolatey community repository is still v2 won't matter. But it does open up the potential for folks who want to use Chocolatey in a repository that is v3 feed only. And that's what we've heard from a lot of folks, both in the community and from our customers, hence the ongoing work. That was a lot of words. But yeah, it's a big change. Now, the other thing that I should say is that anyone who uses NuGet.exe and uses it for managing their assemblies on Windows from a code perspective will know that there's a bunch of additional stuff within NuGet. Now, what I mean by that is support for things like embedded icons within a package, or embedded licenses within a package, or support for signing of NuGet packages. In this scope of work that we're talking about here, we're not talking about implementing any of those functionalities. What we're talking about is bringing in the new NuGet assemblies, making them work for what Chocolatey does today, and then at some future release, we'll look at bringing in some of those specific changes in NuGet that make sense for Chocolatey. So for example, having the ability to embed an icon within a package rather than linking out to an icon URL, that's a big thing, right? I personally would want to see that, because that then makes this concept of a fully embedded package that has all the information that you need to install that thing. Well, the icon's installed, icon is embedded within it as well. So it's just it's a no-brainer to get that implemented. But in the first release of Chocolatey.exe that supports the NuGet v3 API, things like the icon embedded in the package won't be there. So I'm just trying to set the expectations in terms of what is and is not going to be available in the box when we share.
You mentioned GitLab package services. GitHub uses the v3 as well, doesn't it?
It does. Now, the reason I didn't specifically mention that one is because there are other things with the GitHub packages repository where it doesn't work exactly the same as other NuGet feeds. Yes, it's a v3 feed, but you can't do anonymous access to it. So it's not your typical one that you would use for kind of just easily setting up a NuGet packages repository. You need to authenticate for the purposes of listing as well. Now that's something that we should get for free with the new NuGet assemblies that we're bringing in, but whether we provide that in this first release or not is something that I can't speak to. So, but yes, you're right. The GitHub package repository would be another potential for custom packages feeds that you're using for whatever reason. But GitLab is the one that I kind of spoke about because it doesn't do what the GitHub one does. So that I know of. So, there we go.
It would allow the Azure DevOps artifacts feeds to work with
That would be
v3
another
as well. Yeah. So a number of hoops you've got to jump through to get v3
Exactly
working. You've got to use NuGet.exe. I wrote a blog post about it, which is why I brought it up, but that's why I know about that one. But it also supports v2 feeds, so you can pull from that. But it's the other end of it where you're pushing packages. It's problematic.
Correct. But like I say, there's the reasonably big scope of work to bring v3 API support into Chocolatey.exe. There's that big scope of work to bring it into the Chocolatey community repository as well, and that's why we've decided to split them up basically. So we've spoken about putting the NuGet v3 API support into Chocolatey.exe first, allowing folks to use it against other repositories for internal needs or testing purposes, and then once we've literally shipped that, we'll then look to bringing the v3 support into Chocolatey community repository as well. And that would be a big win as well, because there are other things that get opened up by having that functionality on the back end. I don't think we're going to talk about those today, but those are other exciting plans that come down the pipe once we have that in play. So yeah, it's one of these kind of building blocks or steps along the way to get to where we want to be. And yeah, exciting times ahead.
It opens up options for us.
It does.
It gives us more options. So, okay. So the next one I've got on the agenda is talking about pins. So exporting pin status to packages.config. That's a PR that's gone in, and also bypassing pins for upgrade using a switch for that. So it means that you can export the status. When you export packages to packages.config, you can also export the pin status of those packages. Let's say you pin Google Chrome to version 100. I know I'm making numbers. You can actually export that as well to your packages.config, so that if you take that to another machine and it imports it into that machine, you'll get that pin status as well at that particular version. So
exactly.
That. And do you want to speak about the bypass pins one, Gary, for upgrade? Because I know you've looked at that PR as well.
It is. So this one is one of those, I'm not going to call it an edge case because it is a specific need, but it's not one that I would personally run into because of the way that I use Chocolatey. But if you have installed, let's say use Google Chrome again. So let's say you have installed Google Chrome you've disabled automatic updating within the browser itself, and you're relying solely on Chocolatey to do the upgrading when it can. If you've installed version 100 of Google Chrome and you've pinned to that, then you can't then just do Choco upgrade Google Chrome because, well, you've applied a pin. So the pin is there to enforce it not accidentally being upgraded. So even if you do a specific Choco upgrade Google Chrome, Choco will be like, no, I'm not doing that because you told me not to. So what you'd actually have to do is you'd have to do Choco pin remove Google Chrome, then you'd have to do Choco upgrade Google Chrome, and then most likely you want to pin it again. So you'd want to do then Choco pin Google Chrome. So there's 3 commands in there for what is one operation. So the bypass pins, which we're not sold on the name, I think we spoke about this the other day, we're not sold on the name of the option that's being suggested in the PR, but essentially what it would do is Choco upgrade Google Chrome -- bypass pin. So what that would do, hopefully, would be, oh, I know that package is pinned. You've told me that you want to bypass it, so I'll go ahead and remove the pin. I'll upgrade it to the version you've told me about, or the latest one that's available, and then I'll go and put the pin back again. So it makes that 3 commands that you had to run into 1 command, and it's one that you're in control of. So it's one of these ones that's been asked about a few times. That I think there is an issue that's got lots of comments on it, and it's one of those kind of paper cuts that you take away the kind of hassle that goes around with maintaining your chocolate packages, but allows you to control when things happen. Now, there are scenarios where we might not want to respect the bypass pins option. So for example, Choco upgrade all. Does that mean when you bypass pins, you really want to bypass all the pins that you might have and you actually want to pin them all again? Do we allow that? Don't we allow that? There's a few questions that we have to answer in and around this feature request and the PR associated with it. But I think what I've just described, though, on an individual package, when you've explicitly said upgrade a package and bypass the pin, what you're really saying is remove the pin, upgrade it, put the pin back again, and that's me done. So again, naming's hard. It might not be bypass pin, but it might be something else. But again, it's one of those features. It's just makes life easier, I think. So there was a open issue about it. The PR, I think, again, is from the cake. So he's looked at what can be done there and how it can be I was going to say worked around, but that's not the right term. It's a valid workflow that some folks want and need. So it's great to see that PR open and starting to take advantage of that kind of functionality and bringing it into Chocolatey. So yeah, excited to see it.
As he said, depending on how the functionality works, maybe that bypass pins might be confusing, the word bypass. So yeah, that's what we've talked about. Do we rename it? Do we make it do something different to make sure that the bypass is actually what you would expect it to do? So naming is hard, and we just don't want to cause any confusion for people. So that's the reason we're kind of looking at that.
But just to go back to the exporting of the pin status, for me personally, because I mean, not to toot my own horn here, it was me that added the export command in the first place. So what I added in that initial export command was the bare minimum. It was, here's a list of packages, and here's the ability to toggle on and off the version numbers associated with each package, so that when you walk up to a new machine, you get a like-for-like state from one machine to the other. But it was never fully baked. It was the bare minimum of the export functionality. So it's great to see a PR going in that extends that functionality to allow a much closer mirror copy of one machine to another machine. And I think there's another one in there for exporting remembered arguments as well. So Chocolatey by default today, when you pass in parameters, will persist those parameters for when you do an upgrade. But I think there's another PR or another couple of PRs in and around that area that would allow you to export the remembered arguments as well. So again, that just makes, here's my work machine that I'm happy with. It's all set up the way I want it to. Let's do a Choco export of the current state and then move it over to this new machine. So you're getting a much closer end result that mirrors what you've got over here. So it's very much exciting to see that export command being extended. because that was absolutely the intention. It was the bare minimum in the first release with the option to extend it. So again, it's great to see the cake picking that up and extending that export command.
Thanks for not tooting your own horn there as well, Gary.
I try not to. I mean, I'm a modest and humble dude, so I mean, I don't like tooting my own horn, but in this instance, I felt it was necessary. So.
Just while we're talking through the agenda and we're continuing on, I wanted to say if you've got any questions, please drop them into the chat on Twitch or on YouTube, and we'll try and answer them on stream if it's relevant to what we're talking about today. Also, as I said at the beginning, if you're jumping halfway through, you won't have seen that. And please subscribe to the video on YouTube. That's where we'll be uploading the videos afterwards. So we're streaming to Twitch, we're streaming to YouTube, but we actually upload the videos to our YouTube channel afterwards. Please subscribe and you will get notifications when we do live stream. And if you like the video as well, that really helps us get the name of Chocolatey back out there to everybody. And also like and follow us as well on both Twitch and YouTube. That would be much appreciated. So where are we in the agenda? Yes, so one that we've talked about, and it kind of it's going to flow into the next one I want to bring up, which is changing the behavior of the list command to local only. So normally when you do choco list, it'll actually go to, if you haven't configured any sources, it'll go to the Chocolate Community Repository. It'll pull down all those package metadata, and then it'll output that to the command line. So that's not what most other package managers do. When you run when you're in the local command, not local, the list command, it will pull the metadata from the local packages that are already installed. So you're not actually going to the source and pulling that down. So we're going to flip that round for the next major release of Chocolatey version 2 that we're talking about. And we're going to make sure that the list command actually lists the packages installed locally. So you'll no longer need that -- local only switch on the end of your Choco command to get your local packages. We've deprecated it, so we've told every time you run Choco List at the moment in the latest version of Chocolatey, you do get a notice that, hey, we're going to change the way this works in the future version of Chocolatey. So it should be no surprise to anybody. We wanted to really highlight that today because we're talking about things that are going to come up in the future. But it also does flow very nicely into the next thing I wanted to bring up, which was the whole version 2 deprecations we've got. So we've talked to Choco List. That's one of those. But Gary, can you talk us through the others? Because there's a few of them that we've wanted to deprecate for a very long time. Some of them very early versions of Chocolatey where we said we'd deprecate by X version, and it was never actually done. It was never removed. So we're actually doing that work now to remove those in version 2. But can you talk us through them?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So one of the ones, so in version 1.0, the big thing about the version 1.0 release was us getting to a kind of solid baseline of this is the functionality that exists in Chocolatey today, and here are the plans for future ones that we're going to make changes to. So as Paul pointed out with the Choco List local only, we've added that deprecation notice when you try and run it now, but we also started adding other deprecations notices for things that are going to change. So the prime example of that was the command aliases that exist today. So rather than writing, for example, choco install, you can run cinst. It saves a few characters, but under the hood, cinst simply calls choco install. In the same way that clist calls choco list, cpush calls choco push, uninst calls choco. You can see where I'm going with this, right? There's lots of command alias shims technically there are shim under the hood that call specific Chocolatey commands. So we are switching away from those short aliases. Now, the reason that we started that, and in version 1.0 we did this, the cpack alias, which was an alias for Choco Pack, it caused problems if you had, for example, cmake installed, because there would be a conflict between cmake's cpack executable and Chocolatey's cpack executable. And because the Chocolatey folder was first in the path variable, it won and cmake was broken. So we were switching away from those aliases and we're switching to the ubiquitous kind of choco command as the entry point for Chocolatey. But what we kind of expect to happen there is that either by us or by someone in the community, I fully expect that there will be a chocolatey package created that, if you want them, would put all of those shims back in again. But the core product that is chocolatey, as part of the 2.0 release, won't have those shims in it. But if you need them for reasons, or you want them for reasons, you can either put them back in just within your own PowerShell profile. You could add an alias directly within your PowerShell profile, or like I say, I expect that a community member will likely create a package that adds those shims back in again. But chocolate out of the box, those things are going away. There was a couple of the other big one that's coming into the 2.0 release is the concept of removing a default push location. So what I mean by that is, if you were to create a package, run ChocoPack, if you run ChocoPush against that nupkeg without specifying a source, then it will go to the Chocolate community repository, because internally within Chocolatey, that is the default. It's hard-coded, you can't change it, but that's what Chocolatey will push to by default. Now, we're moving away from that because we've heard from customers, we've heard from some folks that they sometimes forget to do the source that they're pushing to. So they end up pushing potentially IP-related packages to Chocolate community repository when they didn't mean to. So the default push location is going to be removed, and it's going to be changed. There'll be a config value within Chocolatey where you can specify what you want your default source to be. But in the absence of that configuration and not specifying a source at the command line, Chocolatey will turn back and say, you haven't told me where you want to push this package to, so I'm not going to do it. So it's a break, because again, depending on what scripts you have and what your setup is, you might assume that the default source is the one that is going to be used. You need to be a little bit more explicit as of V2 to handle that scenario. There's a couple of other ones where in the 1.0 release, we actually marked a couple of other things as deprecated. And then in the V2 release, that's when we'll actually remove them. So just as a point of clarity, in terms of terminology, when we say something is deprecated or something has been marked as obsolete, it's still there. You can still use it today. So the chocolist command is a good example. Chocolist today will give you a warning saying this has been marked as deprecated, marked as obsolete. You can still use it. You'll get a warning. It's still there, though. You can still use it. But in the next major release, fully expect that functionality and other functionality will disappear. So the one example would be there's a get bin root chocolatey helper function. It was a horrible name. Get bin root commandlet was created, and it's actually been renamed to get tools location now, which makes a little bit more sense. But yeah, get bin root commandlet was marked as deprecated in the 1.0 release, and we'll be removing that in the 2.0 release. So there's a few things in and around that area that we want to make sure folks are aware of, because, well, yeah, they are breaking changes, especially if you have scripts set up and doing things in a certain way. Things like this are going to break your scripts, and we want to advertise that as much as possible before we actually make those changes.
Thanks, Gary. We've talked a lot about version 2. You know, version 2 is coming up, version 2 deprecations. One of the things we wanted to reassure people is that there will be a 1.2 release of Chocolatey CLI. We've agreed that. And potentially a 1.3 or a 1.2x release, depending on what comes in after 1.2. But there should be, we're not planning on any more releases in the one branch at the moment. We're planning then to move to version 2. Things change, as we've talked about, you know, the roadmap, we've talked about timelines. So that might change, but that is our plan at the moment. But it was important really to bring that up, because we've started tying the Chocolatey CLI version to Chocolatey licensed extension. So this affects licensed customers. And that coupling can affect perpetual licensed customers who don't have an up-to-date support and maintenance contract. We saw some of that when we released version 1, I think it was, and we fixed that in 1.01 and 1.10. So it's important to note that If you're a perpetual license customer and you don't have an up-to-date support and maintenance contract, it's very unlikely you'll be able to move to later versions of Chocolatey CLI without having that support maintenance contract in place. So that actually doesn't affect the vast majority of our customers, because most of our customers have a subscription-based license where they get that support and maintenance built in, and they pay for that on an annual basis. So that won't affect the vast majority of customers. So if you're thinking, oh, is it going to affect? Probably not. Perpetual license customers tend to know who they are and tend to know the differences in their license. But it was just to really bring up that the things we're talking about, unless you have an up-to-date support and maintenance contract, you're unlikely to be able to. In fact, you won't be able to move to a later version of Chocolatey because your license doesn't cover that maintenance. You're locked at the version that your support maintenance expired at. So it was important to mention that. We've got a couple of other things we want to bring up. We've got 16 minutes left on the stream. And the big one I really wanted to leave to the end just is side-by-side installs. Now, the reason I wanted to leave this to the end is it's I don't know how to base it. It's a pain point for a lot of people. Side-by-side installs doesn't really work the way it was envisioned it would work. There was a kind of concept or a vision of how we wanted Chocolatey to exist with separate package installs of the same software, if you like. That's probably the best description. And it's not really turned out the way we'd hoped. You've dug into this quite a lot, Gary. You have this understanding of this particular topic a bit better than I do, and you've kind of championed this side-by-side installs that we're going to talk about just now. So what I'm going to really do is point at you as the reason this is happening and blame you for it. So when there's the community come around with pitchforks and they're looking for who to blame for this, Gary, it's basically down to you, I'm afraid. It's not me. I was on your side, guys. I wanted to keep them. I thought they were awesome, but Gary pushed, and that's that. So Gary, do you want to apologize to everybody for what you've done?
So thanks for that. So let's set the scene here a little bit. So let's use the example of something like the I was going to say the Ruby package, but let's use something like Python, right? So I'm not a Python developer, but there are, to the best of my knowledge, there are two major versions of Python. There's version 2 and there's version 3. And there's good reason that you would want to use on the same machine the same or both versions of Python. So you'd want to install both Python 2.x and Python 3.x. Now, because of the way Chocolatey works, Chocolatey would allow you to do a Choco install Python to Python -- version 2.x. And then if you were to attempt to do a Choco install Python -- version 3, that would not work, or it would ask, did you want to do an upgrade? But if you said -- allow side-by-side installations, then you would end up with both the Python 2.x package installed and the Python 3 package installed. And initially you'd be like, oh, that's great. That's exactly what I want. The problem with that, though, is then when you come along and say Choco upgrade all, which package version do you want to be upgraded? There's maybe now a 2.4 version of Python and there's a 3.7 version of Python. So did you actually want to upgrade both of them or none of them? Or what do you actually want to happen? So in that scenario, Chocolatey really doesn't know what to do. So I think I'm right in saying it kind of puts its hands up and says, no, I'm not doing it, right? Which is not the ideal scenario. Now, the way that most package maintainers have worked around this issue is that they'll create a specifically named package for both the 2.x version of the package and the 3.x version of the package. So example of Python is there is actually a Python 2 package and there is actually a Python 3 package. So if you wanted to have both versions of Python installed, you can do Choco install Python 2 and then Choco install Python 3. And then you'll get the side-by-side installs are there, but you didn't have to do anything within Chocolatey, specifically within Chocolatey, to handle that scenario. And then when you do Choco upgrade all, It'll check to see if there's a new version of Python 2, and if there is, it'll upgrade it. And it'll check to see if there's a new version of Python 3, and it'll upgrade that. Beautiful. It just works, right? But we also have a meta package that if you want to just install the latest version of Python, you can just do choco install Python. And because it's a meta package, it will just install the latest version of Python 3. So again, it works exactly as described. So long and short of it is, side-by-side package installations as a concept in Chocolatey.exe can be mitigated by package maintainers creating separate packages, separate package IDs for each distinct version of the underlying software. And you'll see that a lot in Chocolatey packages on the community repository. So for example, all of the .NET Framework packages, Jacob, the person behind most of the .NET packages, he's got a .NET FX package, which if you just want the latest version of .NET Framework, you install .NET FX. But if you want a specific version, whether it's version 4.8 or 4.7 or 4.6, and then handling the upgrades of all of those, then because he's segregated the packages out into distinct package IDs, it all just works. So long and short of it is, side by side, great idea conceptually, problematic when it actually comes to implementation. So for that reason, and because of the fact that side by side is not a concept in the new version of the NuGet v3 API assemblies that we spoke about earlier, we're making the decision that we will be marking the side-by-side option as deprecated, so obsolete, in an upcoming 1.x version of Chocolatey. And then you can expect that in the 2.0 release, the concept of a side-by-side installation will be not there anymore. Whew, that was a lot. I hope all that made sense. It's going away, is the long and short of it. It's not going to be there anymore.
I'm not sure the apology was heartfelt, but yeah. No, I think I mean, to make clear from what you've said, Gary, and I am repeating really what you said, is that it never really worked, or it's not working the way we envisaged to begin with. There are ways that you can still get the same functionality as side-by-side installs. And before we do anything, it's really important to point out we have customers and we have members of the community who have set up their environments to use side-by-side installs. And if we suddenly rip that away, then that's problematic. So before we do anything, we will have some documentation there to kind of migrate you or transition you over to how it will be done in future versions. So don't panic. That's the first thing I would say. Don't think, oh no, it's going away tomorrow. It's not. It's not. This is the future of Chocolatey CLI. We're talking about things that we are going to implement. We're also going to do this in this very, very hand-holding approach, if you like. So there'll be documentation around this to tell you how these packages should really look and the ways that you should really have these packages in order to get the same functionality as side-by-side installs, is exactly as Gary said. But that documentation will be there before we do anything. So you'll be able to look at that. And there'll be a time as well when you can get your packages up to date, changed, modified, whatever you want to call it, and be able to use with future versions of Chocolatey. But the big thing is side-by-side installs as they function today are going away. And that's we have decided that the rest of it we're going to implement as I said as we go forward. Looking at the rest of the agenda, Gary, looking at the agenda, Gary, that's actually all we've got to cover. We've covered all of the, I'm just looking at the last one there. Yeah, we've covered everything that we really wanted to talk about today. One of the things I wanted to mention as well is that we've had a question in the channel round about Winget. We get this quite a lot, and I don't think it's a time for us to answer it just now because we're talking about the future of Chocolatey CLI. So I want to say thank you for the question. Do really appreciate it. But we will be talking a bit more about that in the future because we're getting the question more and more, and we want to make sure we answer it properly. rather than potentially coming off as being flippant or coming off as being too proud, or anything like that, and coming off wrong as well. We want to make sure we get people an answer to that, the question that they ask, and make sure that they're satisfied with that answer. And I know that sounds like a little bit of waffle, to be honest, and it looks like we're avoiding the issue. We're certainly not. We talk about this internally. We like to do things properly. We don't like to just knee-jerk and respond to these things. So thank you for the question. If you keep an eye on our blog, you keep an eye on our YouTube, we will have more about that coming up in the future to hopefully answer some of those questions. Is there anything you want to pick up, anything else you want to pick up, Gary, that's coming up in the Future of Chocolatey CLI that we could talk about? We do have 7 minutes.
Try to think if there was anything else in the... So there was, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but we didn't call it out explicitly. So in the 1.0 release of Chocolatey, we broke some of our perpetual customers. Now, the reason that it broke, I'm not going to go into the technical details. The reason it was broke is basically the intersection between Chocolatey and Chocolatey licensed. So what we did as a 1.0.1 release is we reinstated some of the commands that we deleted. So in the 1.0 release of Chocolatey, we deleted the Choco version command and the Choco update command. Those had been marked as deprecated for ages, forever. But we finally got round in the 1.0 release to actually removing them. But because we removed them, we broke some of our perpetual license customers. So what we did in the 1.0.1 release is we added those commands back in, but with no implementation. So they basically just said this command is not supported, but we put them back in again so that our perpetual customers will continue to work. And then in the 1.1.0 release of Chocolatey, we added in a little bit more hand-holding. I don't even know what that word was. A little bit more
problems speaking today. I don't know what it's late.
It's coming to the end of my day now. It's late. It's late. So we added a little bit more hand holding to basically try and say, oh, you've got this version of Chocolatey license installed, but you're using this version of Chocolatey. It's entirely expected that things aren't going to work here. So there's lots of warnings, but you could opt in to say, well, I understand the warnings and I'm happy with them. Just don't tell me about it again. Now, in the 2.0 release of Chocolatey, we're at the minute, the plan is to remove those reinstated commands. So with that additional hand-holding and the additional messaging that we'll be putting out, perpetual license customers will be back to the situation where they were with the 1.0 release, where they can't use the newer version of Chocolatey licensed with an older version of Chocolatey and vice versa. So what we added back in that bug fix release is coming out again. So again, just kind of stressing around perpetual license customers. If you are in that situation, you will not be able to upgrade to Chocolatey 2.0 because things won't work. Or if they do work, it's not necessarily guarantee that it's going to do exactly what you want it to, because of that intersection and that support setup that we're doing between Chocolatey and Chocolatey licensed. So just something to be aware of. There is an issue on the 2.0 milestone on GitHub around the removal of remove the reinstated Chocolatey commands which were added in 1.0.1. So again, just to stress that again, things may work for you, but there's no guarantee that things will work for you. So if you are a perpetual customer, we would highly recommend that one of two things happen. You either pin to specific versions of your Chocolatey products, Chocolatey components, or you look to have a support and maintenance contract where you can upgrade and have access to those additional new feature or new versions of the components.
Just to add to that as well, that won't be supported by Chocolatey as well. So if you've ignored those warnings and you're installing those versions outside of that coupling and things break, then we wouldn't support that configuration. Because we've warned you that it's potentially not going to work. It may work for, let's say you're running one command, that works. but the other commands might not. So some of the functionality might work, some of it's broken. Obviously, we can't support that broken configuration. So we would recommend that you downgrade to particular versions if you don't want a support and maintenance contract, or we would recommend that you upgrade to the latest version. Again, if you've got a support and maintenance contract, you would be able to do that. So yeah, important to stress that. So yeah, your mileage may vary, I think is probably the phrase we can use there. Okay, I think for me, the big thing that's coming up, being a part of the team is Nougat V3 is going to be a huge change for Chocolatey, knowing about, what we're going to do knowing about the internals of Chocolatey CLI and, the amount of work that's involved and actually changing all of that. That's a huge thing for me. It's really exciting that we're moving towards that. There's a lot of work to do to put that into Chocolatey CLI, but also the Chocolatey Community Repository as well, as you mentioned. And we'll do that in phases. But that for me is really, really interesting, that from a Chocolatey perspective, being, as I said, managing the team. But for me, for a user, and I do use Chocolatey all the time. I use Chocolatey on a daily basis, upgrade packages. I've got a Windows machine that I work from. It's those pre and post hooks. I just, while I've got nothing specific, the desktop shortcut one doesn't actually bother me too much because I actually disable all the shortcuts on my desktop. I hate shortcuts on the desktop. But and I can't think of specific functionality I would use it for. But I just think it's really exciting that you're going to get that functionality to be able to run things before and after these packages are installed, and specific packages as well. I can see being used for specific packages. There's a couple of packages that don't do things that I could say just running a post hook script just to add that in. There's a couple of packages I can think right away that don't add start menu shortcuts in there. And rather than going to the maintainer and saying, hey, can you change that? And they maybe have to add functionality into the actual package because maybe the installer doesn't do it. I can actually do it quicker by just adding a post hook and running that script afterwards and just saying, hey, just add this desktop shortcut that's not already there. And again, packages that don't remove, not desktop shortcuts, sorry, start menu shortcut. And packages that don't remove those start menu shortcuts as well. Sometimes you get installers that just don't remove them. And you can add that in as well. So that for me is an exciting thing for a user. Is there anything in particular that you're really excited about working on, Gary, or functionality that's coming up as a kind of user of Chocolatey?
So I mean, you kind of stole my thunder a little bit. I mean, those two things are things that I have. The new V3 one in particular, I mean, it's one that I've wanted in Chocolatey for a long time. But it's also one of those that there's been good reason to not try and achieve it. But we're at the point now in terms of where we are in terms of the code base, the infrastructure that we have, in terms of testing and maintaining stuff. We're in a much better position than we were previously. So even attempting that transition is somewhere that I'm really happy that we've been able to get to. So that one I'm excited to see coming to fruition. It's going to be a lot of work for getting the CCR uplifted to get full support for it, but I'm excited about that one as well. Because again, it opens up other potentials for future functionality that I don't think we're quite ready to talk about yet, but definitely excited to see that coming down the pipe. The other one, again, tooting my old little trumpet, the whole expanding of the export command. I think that is, I've got this vision of being able to export all pieces of information that's on my system, either installed via Chocolatey or that Chocolatey knows about, and being able to put that onto another machine. So that, for me, the expansion of that export command is a step in that on that road. So I'm excited to see that going further. But yeah, those NuGet v3 and the hook scripts. Again, I was going to it is a public repository, so it is there. We have started a Chocolatey-hooks repository in the Chocolatey community organization on GitHub. The idea being there that we could collect together kind of common hooks packages and create and maintain them in that single repository, in the same way that we've got the Chocolatey templates and the Chocolatey packages repository. The kind of it's establishing what the best practices are for hook packages, etc. There will be work in that repository once we actually start to ship that. So we kind of grab that folder or the repository name and put it up there just so it's there. So again, it's not a secret. It's a public repository. Anybody can see it, and it kind of speaks to the work that's ongoing to get that functionality out the door. So no, excited to see that one. Lots of work to do. The .NET Framework 4.8 uplift. It's just time. It's time to do it, and it has a knock-on effect of upgrading some of our dependencies as well. So no, excited to see that coming out the door. And then obviously, once we get to 4.8, there's nowhere else to go above that other than .NET Core. So I mean, take from that what you will. But at some future version, we would expect that we'll be transitioning away from .NET, or as I refer to it, full-fat .NET Framework. That's another chunk of work that I'm excited to get into, just because of speed improvements and security improvements that come down with using .NET Core. So excited about that one at some point. That definitely won't be this year. That one's further down the pipe. But no, excited to see that come down as well. So yeah, lots happening. Exciting time to be involved in all things chocolatey.
And just to make it clear as well that all of the things we've talked about today, every single one of them has been driven either by the chocolatey team internally, but primarily by the community and customers. There'll be issues on GitHub that people have asked about. People have put in pull requests. We've talked about the pull requests from the cake, for example. So all of this stuff is coming into chocolatey. And it's also fostering other discussions, because as you said, put the export command in. Okay, but that's not done. That's, we do more things with it. So while we do one thing, it gives us options to do other things. But every single one of those things has been driven by community customers or the chocolatey internal team to implement. So it's really important that if you're interested in chocolatey, you're interested in where it's going, you're interested in letting us know how you use it, what functionality you'd like, etc. Let us know. Go on to GitHub. It's github.com/chocolatey, and we've got various repositories in there. So the chocolatey CLI one is github.com/chocolatey/choco. You'll be able to look in there, and we've got a lot of licensed issues under chocolatey/home, and also under chocolatey-license-issues as well. So if you're a commercial customer and you want to raise some issues, you can do that in there. I would ask you to contact support if you have any problems, going ahead. But if you get any feature requests, then I would suggest that you raise them on that repository. So we're just a little bit over time. I think we started just a little bit late, but yeah, we've just went over time a little bit. I just wanted to say thank you very much to everybody for watching us today. Thank you as well to Gary for talking us through some of those issues. And thank you to the community and customers for driving us and telling us which direction you want us to go in. As I've said throughout this, please subscribe to us on YouTube when you see the video. You can like us on there as well. Also follow us and follow us and subscribe, as I said, on YouTube and Twitch. And yeah, we will be back on the 18th of August with our normal chocolatey community coffee break stream, where we'll talk about the community and we'll talk about how you can get involved and all that good stuff around about the community. We don't usually have a set agenda for that too much. We tend to just kind of let that flow a little bit. But if you want to ask questions for that particular stream, we've created a channel in our Discord called AMA-questions. So if you join our Discord, hopefully someone will pop the link into chat there, but it's also in the description in YouTube and also in Twitch. You can get to ask questions ahead of the stream, and we'll try and answer them on the stream. I've also put together a form that you can complete. So if you actually follow us on Twitter, you'll be able to see that form getting tweeted out, and you can ask questions through that as well. Questions are anonymous. Obviously in Discord, your name's attached to it, but questions through the form are anonymous, but you can provide details if you want us to get back to you as well. So yeah, that's all for today. Gary, if you got anything to say before we finish?
No, that's all from me.
Okay, thanks very much, guys. I really appreciate you watching us today, and we'll catch up with you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.